Hi, I'm Zachary Bowman. I'm the manager of education and visitor experience here at the Samuel Dorsky Museum of Art. I'm really excited to welcome the curators of the exhibition Dos Mundos, Reconstructing Narratives, Juanita Lanzo and Stephanie Lindquist, who will moderate today's talk with three artists in the exhibition, Yu-Chen Chiu, Laylah Amatullah Barrayn, and Anthony Hamboussi. I just want to quickly thank the staff at Foco, the organization really responsible for this exhibition. This show will travel to other SUNY museums and galleries in the future. So if you're not able to see it at the Dorsky, keep your eye out for other locations. I also want to quickly thank Bobby Esmark, whose generous support through the Esmark Creativity Project made possible the programs we've hosted in conjunction with this really excellent show. And then I'm gonna toss it right back over to Juanita and Stephanie and the artists who you're really here to see today. Thank you so much for joining us.
My name is Stephanie Lindquist. Thank you for the introduction, Zach. And thank you to the entire team at the Samuel Dorsky Museum for making this possible. And thank you again to the staff of Foco who produced the exhibition and chose these excellent fellow photographers over the years. Sorry, I've lost my page now. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with three really accomplished photographers, Laylah Amatullah Barrayn, Yu-Chen Chiu, and Anthony Hamboussi. And before we jump into the meat of the show and some of the themes that connect these three artists, I'm going to turn it to Juanita to talk a little bit about Foco and their publication Nueva Luz.
Well, as you know, Foco is an arts nonprofit organization that supports the work of photographers of color, African, Latino, Native American, Asian, and Pacific Islander. And it was created in 1974. They support the work of photographers through exhibitions, professional development, other opportunities, but most important, the Nueva Luz publication. And I just want to bring you back to the Nueva Luz page here. I don't want to make you dizzy. Oh, I missed a slide, but you know what I'm going to do? I just want to show you. I don't know if you all can see me because I'm sharing my screen, but we have our Nueva Luz publication is Nueva Luz 24-2, and it's actually a catalog where the works of the 12 artists featured in the exhibition are here presented. Nueva Luz is published twice a year, and the importance of Nueva Luz is that it advances and promotes the work of photographers. Some of them, some of the fellowship that every year, and Stephanie will talk a little bit more about that, are featured in the Nueva Luz catalog publication, but also others relevant social and cultural topics are highlighted here. Just gonna make it closer so you can see it, and I'll show it again. And the importance also of Nueva Luz is that it also expands the narratives of these photographers through essays by other artists, other scholars, and other people that are involved with the issues that are discussed in the Nueva Luz. Did I miss something?
No.
And this is, my apologies, this is a slide for about Foco. Stephanie, I'm gonna pass it on to you.
Yeah, can we go to the fellowship page?
Absolutely.
So, Foco supports 10 artists of color based in New York every year with an award of $1,000, an opportunity to be in a group exhibition, and then, of course, being featured in the Nueva Luz publication. The next deadline for applications is December 19th, and I encourage you all to spread the word.
Excellent. Another way that Foco supports work of photographers outside of exhibition, in addition to the Foco Fellowship, is also a new grants program for artists that are expanding the lens-based photography that includes video, film, and where there's a hybrid of these. I included the link here on the slide so you can, and I'll include it in the chat so you can check this wonderful opportunity. The deadline, as you see, is approaching is January 11, 2021. And for more information, please visit the website, but this is a great opportunity for photographers that are expanding the photography medium and are working with digital media technologies. And these are links for the general page of Foco, where we have not only the Dos Mundos exhibition, but other opportunities for Foco, and exhibition about, a link up where the Dos Mundos reconstructing narratives, including artist biographies and videos about their statement are also included here, information about the fellowship and the media opportunity, and Foco Media Works opportunity.
So I just pasted those links in the chat.
Thank you.
And at this point, yeah, let's talk about the show. So like Zach said, the exhibition is traveling. It's currently at New Paltz, SUNY New Paltz. It'll be going to SUNY Fredonia, and then Binghamton, and then Stony Brook. Dos Mundos Reconstructing Narratives features 12 fellows awarded between the years of 2016 and 2019. And these 12 artists are telling collective stories of the communities that they traverse and they work in. And these are communities that have been historically ignored by the establishment. Some of the stories included in the exhibition include those of Cuban punks, families living in sanctuary, and folks who just refuse to conform to any monolithic idea of, a racial, sexual, or religious identity. And today's artists, Laylah, Amatullah, Barrayn, Yu-Chen, Chiu, and Anthony Hamboussi, they have traveled to the US and abroad to tell stories that really point to some of our largest challenges of structural discrimination, as well as the people who resist dominance and seek a better future for their community. And in the slideshow, you will see images from the exhibition, but we've also asked the artists to send us a few other images to expand the conversation. And I encourage you to hold your questions until the end, but please save them in your mind. So yeah, without further ado, we will begin with our questions.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie, for that great introduction. So I'm going to start asking a question, and what you guys can do is that I'm going to ask the question to all three of you. I'm going to start with Laylah, move to Yu-Chen, and then to Anthony. And my first question is what perspective do you bring as an immigrant or traveler?
I'm honored to be here, and I'm most definitely honored to be in the Dos Mundos exhibition with some fabulous and amazing artists and amazing thinkers. So my perspective is always shifting because I'm always open to what the present is, to the present moment that I'm in. I'm never, decided on something, because especially if I'm in a place that is new to me, then I have to be open. And if I am calling myself a storyteller, calling myself a student and a photographer and a documentarian, I most certainly have to have that kind of openness and listen, because what I am essentially going to do, I'm going to record what is happening. I'm engaging with community. I'm exploring these identities and these different constructs that are in front of me. And it's ultimately going to be a collaboration. So the perspective that I bring is an open one. I'm open. I've been interested in religion, specifically Islam, and specifically the approach to Islam that is Sufism or Tasawwuf. And so that looks very different in different parts of the world. So I focused my travels on places where I knew that there were communities engaging in Sufism. And of course, I'm interested in the African diaspora, the Black diaspora. So Senegal, Mauritania, Mali, South Africa, Tanzania, Egypt, UAE, Oman. So those are the places where when I am there, I'm interested in the different cultural expressions of Islam. So that's where mainly I have been focusing on my exploration of religion.
Thank you, Laylah. So maybe I can post this question unless I left something out. So how about you, Yu-Chen? What perspective do you bring as an immigrant or as a traveler?
Mhm. So I think, first of all, I just want to say thank you for Samuel Dobsky Museum and Foco, and also Juanita and Stephanie to, give me this opportunity. Very honored to be part of the exhibition. And it's just also very pleasant to, to be showing my work with the other 11 very talented artists as well. Just want to thank you at the first. And regarding to your question, I think as an immigrant who came to the United States by myself, I come into telling stories about migration and belongings. So I think the constant cultural conflicts and the state of searching for myself and home definitely influenced my creative choices. So I would say I would like to bring my outsider's perspective and tell hidden stories about human migrations.
Thanks, Yu-Chen. Where were some of these images that we're going to be taken? Can you say a little bit about that? Just briefly. We're going to go in depth, but just to kind of create a context.
You will see the images was taken in Texas and Arizona. And this one's from Brooklyn, New York.
Oh, this last one? Okay.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, this one was taken actually recently. And
Mm-hmm.
This from Texas. This
okay, sorry, let me.
Yeah. So basically, the photos the audience will see today would be from Florida, from Texas and New York.
Thank you so much, Yu-Chen. I'm going to repeat the same question for Anthony. And I will ask Anthony, what perspective do you bring as an immigrant or as a traveler?
Hello, everyone. So, yeah, I'd also like to thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And as an immigrant or traveler, so my idea of the perspective I bring is, as Laylah said, I try to keep myself very open, but of course my perspective comes from my upbringing, my background, my understanding, coming from a working class background, and also growing up in a place where I watched the my own family members suffer a lot of indignities, being immigrants, being different, speaking a different language, going to schools in predominantly, of course, predominantly white areas, and feeling as an outsider and never really belonging, and then going back to places where we were from and still being an outsider, and those are the kind of perspectives, I guess those are the things I hold, and as I'm looking, as I speak, through my photographs, or as I'm looking to make images, I'm always thinking about those are the perspectives I have, that's where I'm coming from. Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, that's it. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So I would love to jump into some of the series that we're showing right now, and ask you all how you form relationships with your subjects, or do you? So actually, since we're here on Laylah's, why don't we begin with you, Laylah? I know that one of the really beautiful things you do is interview your subjects to capture some of their story. So yeah, tell us how do you form relationships?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing, I just want to kind of say something about the language, right? So subject and capturing, I don't use, I used to use those words, but I don't use them anymore, because I think there's, for me, like this, I feel, you know, I have a different, trying to say how I feel, but I like different words, right? So there are people in my photograph. So they are most certainly people, and they are a subject, but they're people first. So I like to say that. And I like to form relationships with them. I do a lot of revisiting of the places and the themes and the communities and the people that I photograph, because I'm evolving, they are evolving, and our interaction is evolving. The questions I have are always evolving. So even photographing one person and going back the next year, you know, the conversation is going to be different. I always have a different inquiry and an expanded inquiry, because it's, you know, it's different. I'm different. They're different. The world is different. And so, so I make it a point to do that. Everything is, you know, we're all students of life, and life is moving and it's living and it's changing. So, wait, did I answer the question? I feel like I'm rambling.
You did. Maybe you can give me an example of, yeah, how have your questions changed, for instance, in revisiting Senegal? Or, yeah, I would love to know.
When I first got to Senegal, I was a student. I was in my early 20s, and I was interested, of course, being a person of African descent, being on the African continent, because I had learned so much about the different histories of the different countries. So when I first got there, I just had very general inquiries about where I was, the specific histories of liberation of Senegal, and all of the different movements that came out of it, you know, like Negritude movement, Senghor,
Sorry.
and you know, his you know, the arts, and of course looking at religion. And so, you know, those are my first kind of inquiries and interest. And I was in one place, I was in Dakar, was focused on this city, you know, what the culture of this city was. But this particular image was taken in another city, and that city is called Saint Louis, and that is the former colonial capital of Senegal. And so when I took this image maybe 10 years after my first visit. And when I took this image, I didn't know much about Saint Louis. I didn't know much about it being a colonial capital, and I didn't know much about how photography was used as a colonial tool. So when I got there, I started to explore the culture of the city, the history of the city, and of course, with it being a colonial, former colonial city, there were enormous archives that were there. So then I began to become interested in the archives there, the photography that was there, who was doing the photography. And I learned that, of course, there were archives from the colonial photographers, and then there were archives from the African photographers, the Senegalese photographers, who had set up studios there. And then I learned about how people were interacting with those different spaces, you know, with colonial photographs, of course, you know, people in those photographs that had little to no agency at all. You know, it was a whole nother experience with creating a photograph. Whereas, you know, the Senegalese photographers, the Senegalese, the local people were very much players, you know, active players with agency in creating their images. And you could see that. And so in this photograph, you know, Ibrahima, who is a friend of mine, who is also a photographer and an archivist, is showing me a picture of his mother and her cousin. And this was taken in Saint Louis in a studio. And the sitters in the photograph are very much like elected to go there, elected to wear what they were wearing and posing themselves and looking elegant and beautiful. And so, you know, that's just, and so I revisited Saint Louis many, many times again, looking at photographs, looking at archives, looking at family albums, trying to find the older Senegalese photographers who had studios. You know, many, many things. So those are just two kind of, in a 10-year span, what I was interested in then and what I'm interested in now, so.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Laylah. And I also really appreciate you speaking about language and how these are people and not subjects. So thank you for that. Yeah, no, thank you. And Anthony, I'd love to turn to you now, and maybe we could look at an image from Surfside Gardens, Juanita.
Mhm.
Anthony, I understand that you worked in a center at the Surfside. Oh, and maybe actually, can we go to the playground image maybe?
Mhm.
Or this one, or unless you have a preference, Anthony. But I would love to hear about how you formed a relationship with this community over time.
I mean, my relationships with communities that I photograph, I mean, they vary from project to project. This particular project with the Coney Island, in the Coney Island housing projects, I started working as a teaching artist for the New York City Housing Authority back in 2005. And I started working, doing art projects with kids and seniors as well as teenagers in the community centers. And I've actually worked in all the different community centers in Coney Island. And at some point, I exclusively worked just in Coney Island. I've worked in many housing developments across the city. But getting to understand the environment and what I'm photographing has a lot to do with the deep relationships I formed with the children and their parents, and the community center was a really it's a really, like, it's a nucleus of the community there. It's really a lot of things happen there, and getting to know the children and the parents, and a lot of the younger teens, and even the elders, the seniors, getting to know everyone, helped me really understand what I was looking at and understand how the environment impacted them, and what they were dealing with on a daily basis. Learning about how, like, one in every 2-3 children there had asthma, because of the conditions they lived in, and learning about what it takes to go get fresh vegetables and fruits when all that's available are liquor stores and storefront churches, and I mean, it's a very, very specific Main Street kind of layout that's and what is afforded to them, so getting to know the community and spending time. I mean, I worked with the community. I worked there for 10 years, till about 2013, about 8 years, and then continued photographing and visiting for a number of years. But for the first few years, I never expected this to be a photo project. It just happened to work where I was just photographing. I would bring my camera with me before I was doing my workshops, and I would photograph, and I would also photograph the community. I would give them pictures. I mean, my workshops were photography workshops, so I would work with the children that way, and then it just developed after looking back at what the images were, and I thought it was something that needed to be seen. People look, you even type in Google Coney Island, and all you're going to see is a Ferris wheel and a lot of mermaids and things like that. But the truth is there's a large community there that is in the shadow of those things, of the myth of Coney Island, who receive none of the kickbacks of all the, I would say, the developers coming in, and all the different schemes that have been concocted to develop Coney Island over the years, and the residents get none of that. They get more oppressed by that, if nothing else. More surveillance towers go up, more police presence that keeps them regulated to outside, not to leave their spaces, really so 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 yeah, the relationships develop, and you know, I'm of course even though I develop these long-term relationships, I still see myself as an outsider, and you know, I photograph, I do some portraiture, but I never present that portrait. I haven't shown that portraiture in a public space, and the portraiture I share with them. You know, it's with the folks that I photograph. You know, and then otherwise, most of my photographs don't have people in them, but it has the conditions of that. You know, that the landscape, the racialized landscape, you know, and what has you know, sort of created this continuing cycle, you know, of how it continues to be neglected.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer, Anthony.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yu-Chen, I'd love to turn to you. And I'm curious, like, as you travel to Texas, to Arizona, do you create relationships with any of the people that you're photographing?
So, just want to give a little background about this project. So I started this project back to 2012. But at that time, it was more like a travel log at that time, when I just go travel and I take photos of what I see and what I'm curious about. But as I got my green card in 2015, so I started to question myself about, you know, what American means to me. And that's how I start to travel intentionally inland, and start to capture the spirit of collective memories of American life. So that's how this photo series got started. So I would say how I formed the relationship. I think my process is pretty organic, because I normally only have like outline about, you know, the things I want to capture, but I wouldn't like, you know, like jot out like details of like checklists or something like that, because it just never worked to me. I would say like I would leave the environment to come to me and get inspired and stimulated. So that's my process. And I normally don't direct or notify the subject when I take photographs. So I take the lead of capturing the unguarded moment. And I think so far this works well. I also try a couple times, you know, like try to inform the subject or ask for permission. But I have no luck so far, because I mean, I totally understand like it's human nature, like people will start to act or be aware. And this is just not the spirit I want to capture. So yeah, so that's the way how I form the relationship with my subject. But I think I just want to mention, particularly for this project, I would say because I have a warm up, is like I have some stories or backstories about American before I started this project. It was like because I grew up in Taiwan, and so when I was a kid, like Sesame Street was kind of popular. So you can see like those shows on TV. So it was, I would say that was kind of my initial inspirations, or my initial image of America is very colorful and very happy. And then when I attend high school, I was actually on a boarding school. So we have really strict like regulations. So you can't, you know, go out to school in weekdays. But you only can go out on Wednesday night, and they will have a school bus. They will drop you off in certain places. So you only have limited, you know, like range of the area that you can go to, and go to the movie theater is my only escape at the time. So I usually go by myself to watch Hollywood movies. So I think one of the things that, like forms my memories or my understandings about America or United States is from the Hollywood movies as well. But when I came to school for a college in Taiwan, I was an English major. So I started to understand more depths about the culture or about, like very diverse or very different ideologies through American literatures. So like Robert Frost or Emily Dickinson or some colonial literature. So that's how I start to have different perspective about the United States. So those are kind of my warm up before I came to the United States. So when I start this project, I feel those background or the knowledge is also infused to my visual understanding or my perspective of America.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yu-Chen. I want to follow, actually, and maybe I'll stick with Yu-Chen, Stephanie, because of something that, you and I were talking about when we were going over the images. But Yu-Chen, I'm going to start with you asking you what stories is your work telling and how do your images translate these ideas. I'm just going to go slowly through the images and just please let me know where to stop to be very specific. But I'm going to start with Yu-Chen because this work is from the series America Scene.
Yeah.
And Yu-Chen, I want you to tell me or just share with us, how these were taken. We know where the states, but I just want you to go a little deeper on them.
Sure. So this photo series is a social poem about the social landscape of the United States during the Trump administration. So I would say I started out as project to question myself about my identity and standing as an immigrant. But later on, I feel rather than it's a journey about self-exploration, I feel it's more a documentation of a history of this uncertain era of the United States. Since like many matters got magnified, such as like race and gender, or like freedom and patriotism, or violence and understanding. So that's how this project got started, and this also the message I want to deliver. So this one, so I took this image just because, as you see, the boy was covered his ears. So I feel like this kind of representations of like trying to avoid the domestic violence. So yeah, so this is what I feel like at that moment. So I captured this image, and also I have the other image is also taken at the same place, but for me it represents like different meanings. Yeah, so it's this one. So actually, these two images taken at the same place is like a family-friendly shooting range in Arizona. Yeah, it's like a tourist spot. So for this image, I feel it's kind of interesting because when I see like the tips, jar, you have an American flag, and next to the gun. I think it was just kind of surprised to see this because it just make me feel like it seems like people are embrace the violence in a way. But it was just more my personal thinking about that. But at the same time, I also want to capture that image because I feel like I would like to extend my conversation to the audience. So that's why, as you see, like all my images, they are more like an open dialogue. Yeah. And for this image, it was like it's a couple sit next to each other on a ferry. But as you see, the background seems like you can't really tell like what's in the backdrop. So it's kind of mysterious like surroundings. But this like couple, they sit next to each other, but they seems unrelated, or it seems like they are focused on different emergency. Like the female was really focused on just like on looking into the map, and the male was kind of looking out of the window. So so it just make me feel like it's what I feel like, like what we are in right now. It's like we're in kind of like nowhere. You don't really know where we stand, and also like people kind of like related but unrelated. Yeah.
What about this one, Yu-Chen? What can you tell me about? What can you tell us about this one?
So this one is taken in the State Fair, Texas. So for me, I feel like this one. So I'm just give you a little background of what's going on, just in case some people not really understand what's going on there. So it was a woman who is grabbing like a $1 bill for like a promotion game at the State Fair. So I took these photos is because when I see from the outside, and you can see there's a reflection of like the back, but also those like $1 bills like flying out, and she was really trying hard to grab this, but seems like not. She's doing pretty well, right? It's like almost full. Yeah. So for me, I feel it also is kind of representation of like what we are right now. It's like, we are kind of living in the chaos. You can really see, very clearly like what's going on, and we are trying to grab whatever we can. It probably can be money, it can be status, or it can be security, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually moving what is interesting is that with the reflection at first, I didn't notice how she's trying to grab these dollar bills here. It reminded me of the scratch and win in urban places, so it has a connection to that. How about this image?
So this image is also taken in Texas. It was during a rodeo show. So for me, the first thing is a female. Do you call it a female cowboy, or you call cowgirl? I don't know. How you say it. But it's like a female like figure who's doing like the national anthem. And the second thing is that she's bowing her head. So for me, I think it's kind of self-explaining in a way. So that's why I take these photos, and also like the center focus is on her, and you can see there's a little bit like spotlight on her as well. But nothing feel very cheerful or very inspiring in a way for me. Yeah. So I took this. Yeah.
And how about these were not actually so different from the other ones where you travel outside New York City, where you're based, right? Where was, I mean, we can have a look at the skyline here and pretty much guess where this was taken. So are these also part of the America Scene series, or is this a different body of work?
So for this, so actually I started to document my neighborhood more often since this March due to the pandemic, so I can't really travel. And as you see, this photo is also part of the commission work from Aperture Foundation and Fujifilm. So I'm also very happy to have this opportunity, so I can push myself more to, just like walk around and also keep documenting the collective memory of American life. So this photos, it's actually taken in Navy Yard, so it's in Brooklyn. So the reason why I took this photo is, the first is like, because as you see the background, you can see the skyline, but you see it's empty, no one's there. And then in the front, you can see there's like a fence, and on the fence you can see those like photographs of probably people like, they unfortunately died during the pandemic, or they'll just memorize them. Probably it's like through like social movements or, other happenings this year. So for me, I just feel like this is also just the spirit of this year, and you can see everything is right there. It's like, in the background it's very quiet and no one's there, but in the front, there's many things going on and many things that we should, step back and to, think and how we can embrace more, tolerance and understanding of the world.
Thank you, Yu-Chen. I'm going to post this question since I have Anthony next, and I'll just repeat the question just to keep it fresh, but it goes back to what story translate these ideas. And I'm gonna move from Yu-Chen to Anthony since I have him next door, and I'm gonna post the same question for Laylah, but I'm going to start with Anthony and stop, or do you want to talk about a particular image?
Well, the image you have is fine. So my, I guess that in general, it's the story, the way I actually present the images. I usually try to present the images in a linear way, how they were photographed, So the earliest photographs between 2005 and 2000, well, I continued working through 2020 on this project, but I guess the story has a lot to do with the way it was rolled out to me and how I started. Like, there are certain, I would say, things that I wasn't aware of when I first started working on these pictures. And as I continued working over the years, those things so the images would take on different meanings. So, when they were first made, they might not have the same meaning that they have today. And, that goes with any photography. In hindsight, when we see, images and what they mean, depending on what we know or what we bring as viewers to the images. But I guess when I started working in the first image with the playground, that particular image, there's these the playgrounds. I mean, I'm working with children and I'm looking at the playgrounds, and that in the mornings you would go out there and you would see broken glass, you would see all kinds of things from that out there, and the playgrounds were never taken care of. They were and I in the end, that story is direct right there, like Surfside, that playground, look at it, it looks kind of sad. And I was very aware of light. I was very aware of taking the pictures in a certain condition, creating a certain mood. This picture right here, you would see, go back anyway.
Me to go back to this one?
I mean, it's basically as I moved through as I moved through the landscape, my stories were basically based on, a lot of it had to do with environmental conditions, and how it affected the residents, and not only the environmental conditions, but the policing. I think that was something also that was predominant in a lot of the pictures I would take. In this particular picture, so you may not see all the details here, but if you open up this picture, I made these pictures on 8x10 view camera. So I actually print my images pretty large. The ones at the museum are not as large. We had to be conservative with the space. But would look at all the details, and this was during Obama's presidency, and you could see the picture of Barack Obama prominently in the front window there, you know, and you know, yeah, you could see, I mean, when you start reading all the little details, everything gives, you know, these details give to the narrative. They give to the story that's being told. You know, and again, the story is not, it's kind of open-ended, because I assume that the story will take on a new meaning in the next 20 years, for example. So I'm very interested in creating archives as well. You know, and the archive, you know, is where, you know, these could be immediate, and they could be for the here and now. But when you look at them in years to come, they also have a new, you know, it's looking at old archives. For me, when I look at old archives, I see how things have developed, and I see where we're almost looking at the blueprint for what's going on now, you know, and we see the sickness, you know, this repeat of history and what's going on. And when it comes to gentrification, you know, this new body of work. So I've just started.
Oh, let me go to the last,
which
to
is,
these two.
yeah, this is a neighborhood in Brooklyn called Sunset Park. So you see this is one of the, so there's a lot of gentrification, a lot of displacement. This is mainly for years and years, working class Latino, you know, Latinx neighborhood. And the stores, you know, small stores, this one was Happy Days, you know, and now it's no longer happy, and, you know, and the signs taken down. There's this kind of like, you know, there's this kind of blank slate. You're going to see all the developers moving in. They've been, you know, even though there's been a lot of progress, especially there's a group working in Sunset Park called Uprose. Amazing work they're doing. They just, you know, they just fought this long battle. They were trying to change all the rezoning in Sunset Park, and they fought this long battle for years and years, and they actually stopped, you know, the rezoning plans. So it's amazing what grassroots groups are doing, and especially Uprose. If you would like, you could check them out, help support them, and that would be great. But again, this is a new project that I've been working on, and looking at the there goes another, looking at the writing on the wall, you know, in literal terms, you know, for sale by the colonizer, you know what I mean? It's, and there's, you pack your bags going away, you know, there's really a struggle, and there's really a fight going on, you know, for the working class, for the people who've lived there for years, for generations, who've built this communities, and now, you know, they're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for a chance to continue surviving, you know. So hopefully my pictures are telling those stories. You know, they're helping use the narratives the way I'm trying to focus on them. I mean, again, I'm not focusing so much on the people, but the stories are about the people, because these are the places they live, you know, and these are their stories. You know, this is a new project, so I'm just starting, and again, how you say I develop relationships, just take it a step back. With Sunset Park, you know, my relationship started more with, you know, getting involved in some protest movement, you know, with Uprose, going to some of their meetings, going out with them to some of the to some of the marches, you know, and you know, getting together with those residents through that community organization, you know, and starting to understand, you know, what the residents are faced with, what they're being faced with on a daily basis, you know, whether it's, you know, these kind of like dealing with this, you know, changes in the zoning and or whether it's like, you know, big corporate, you know, entities trying to get control and bring in their, you know, like, you know, what happened in places like Dumbo or Williamsburg, you know, I mean, the communities that once existed in those places have been completely pushed out, you know, and what's going on in, you know, other places. And I don't know too many places outside of Brooklyn because I'm here in Brooklyn, but I'm sure it's happening in the Bronx, and I'm sure it's happening in other places. I'm sure it's happening in Harlem and plenty of places. But what I'm looking at Brooklyn because that's my, you know, that's my where I live and where I've grown and I know intimately. So yeah, so the stories I'm trying to tell are just that. And if the pictures, like I said, those stories may change in time. They may change.
Thank you, Anthony.
With the history that comes out of it. Okay, thank you.
No, you know what happened? You froze for a moment, so it may be my internet connection. So I heard silence and I thought I got disconnected.
No, that's good, thank you.
Yeah,
no, that's it.
Well, no, I was just thinking of Brooklyn, and the reason why I fast forwarded or I moved to the beginning of the slideshow is that I know this image from Laylah was also taken in Brooklyn, and you know, just to circle back to that question, I want to ask, you know, this time to Laylah. I know that, you know, the answers are not the same, but it's interesting how all these connecting threads relate to one another. And this picture is taken here in Brooklyn by Laylah, and I just want to ask, you know, what stories in her work, what stories her work are, you know, her work is telling, and how are these images, you know, how are, you know what, let me read from my page. How do your images translate these ideas? So I'm going to post these two questions for Laylah. And we're going to stay in Brooklyn. What stories is your work telling, Laylah, and how do your images translate these? Thank you.
Well, you know, just to be quick, because I know we're running out of time, and I'm actually on assignment very soon. So, yeah, all of my work is personal, and they're explorations. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you. For a moment, I froze.
Okay.
I lost you.
Okay, no problem. So as I was saying, most of my work is personal. They are explorations of themes that I've been interested in as a woman of African descent, as a Muslim. And so I'm always looking to explore and amplify personal and collective narratives, you know, from the African diaspora. And my work really looks at intimacy, it looks at beauty, it looks at faith and religion. I've been interested in memory. I've been interested in the idea of belonging and community, as I mentioned before. I'm interested in archival practices as they relate to memory and evidence of being here and doing that type of work. Expression of identity, I've been interested in that, particularly as a person of African descent. And I believe that like the retention of culture and the expression of identity has been the reasons why people of African descent have survived the Middle Passage and survived in the New World and have been able to explore, have been able to evolve in that sense. So I think that culture is a very powerful tool. And I think that, you know, we all know that because of the efforts that are put forward to suppress culture. So, you know, I'm interested in that, introspection and liberation, you know, just to be quick.
No, absolutely, that was amazing. And you know, I love hearing, you know, I was listening to the audio, but I just want you to tell us a little bit more about this connection of of Majeda, who she is.
Right, Majeda.
It just ties back to what Anthony was saying.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear the last two words you said.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, it just relates to this connection and kind of breaking bread, and that relationship that you have with your subjects. I just want to hear more about Majida.
Right.
And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her name.
Yeah, it's okay. Her name is Majida. But, you know, Majida, I knew her, I think we've known each other for about 20 years. This is in front of one of the masjid, the mosque, that are in Brooklyn that she goes to and I would frequent when I was younger. And so this is a site that I have revisited. I've known Majida for a long time. I respect her. And she's actually someone, the mosque secretary. So a lot of people lean on her. She's an organizer in this community. She does, you know, she takes up a lot of initiatives to support the community, whether financially, socially, just a person who is present in the community and does a lot of work in making sure that everyone has what they need. And so I took this picture right when we started to actually be able to buy masks, because before, you know, there were no masks available, you know, during March and April, you know, and then when we started to have to wear them, like state mandated us to wear masks, I was around my neighborhood in Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, making photographs, and I asked Majida if she wouldn't mind posing for a photo with me. And so we did. We met up that day. I didn't know what she was wearing or anything like that. So, and I made this photograph of her, and I wanted to show her in her essence of who she was, you know, someone who was powerful, responsible, accountable, and loving. And I hope that those themes are expressed in that photograph, because that is who she is, and that was my intention with this particular portrait.
So Laylah, I'm gonna stick with you because I know you're you're on assignment for this last question. And I would like to know, what are some of the myths that you're busting with your work? I mean, when I look at it, I see just like a really wide diversity of people. So I'd love to hear you talk about that. And then also, you know, you and Anthony talked about the archive. And I know outside of your individual practice, you're also part of the Kamoingi group, and you have also been really active in your creation of the M phone. Am I saying that correctly, or do you say
Fun.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to hear you talk about the myths that you're busting and the archival work that you are also creating, not just researching.
Well, you know, I was raised to be a very proud person of African descent. So all of my work kind of stems from that kind of pride. And I think a result of that is that I am, you know, kind of, you know, pushing back or like upending the like irrational ideas around white supremacy, like the delusions of white supremacy, you know, as I present what is true about African people, people of African descent, you know, that is a result of that, you know, our strength, our culture, our history. And as you just present those things, you know, all of the things that are not true about us kind of fall to the wayside just naturally. And so, you know, so there's a bunch of myths with those things that fall to the wayside, you know, just naturally. And I'm not sure if it's just kind of worth talking about it, but I do want to focus on what is true and real and important about people from the African continent, people from the in the diaspora. So the second question was what?
Kamoingi and M-phone, and I'm just thinking about, you know, not only when you were describing your visits to Senegal and spending a lot of time like looking through the archive, I also realized that you are actively creating an archive, and then you are also supporting the creation of other archives by supporting other artists and being part of other groups. I'd love to hear you talk about that work.
For sure. So I'm part of the Kamonge workshop, Kamonge, and so that means working together. It is a photography collective established in 1963. It's the oldest Black photography collective, and I'm one of the newer members. I've been in that group for about 3 years now, and it's been a learning experience because the members there have been practicing photography, making photographs, engaging with this medium for decades. And so I'm so new. I'm excited about it. And my work with MFun. So MFun is a book that I co-published independently with my best friend, Adam Adelphi and Fawundu. We're both photographers. And it is a book of women photographers from the African continent and throughout the diaspora. And we wanted to do that book because, of course, there was only one other book that focused on Black women photographers, and that's called Viewfinders, and it was published in 1986, and it featured 40 Black women photographers, and that was it. So we decided that it was important to have another book exist in the world that supported Black women photographers and put that work out into the public. So that our book includes 118 photographers from 27 countries. And the book explores a lot of different themes and puts forth our perspectives on those themes. And we were so proud to do that. And so, yeah, so that's pretty much it, with the book in the archive.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yu-Chen, I'd like to turn to you right now. You spoke about your perspective of the U.S. when you were in Taiwan. So I'm curious to know, what are some of the ideas or myths of this country that have changed for you now that you've been here so long and you are actively documenting a collective history?
So I would say because before I came here, my knowledge about the United States is more like it's more like a positive. Everything is like okay, huge landscape, and you have like very fancy, very fancy restaurants, hotels, and all the people are very happy, and all the people have what they want. So everything is very positive. But when I came here and when I start, intensively travel inland, I started to notice what I see is very different from what I understand from, how you call it stereotypes, or from movies, or from the image on TV, or from magazines. And I also was be able to chat with some locals about, what their life, or, what they do in their certain states. So I got all of the understanding about the lifestyle, very varies in different states. So I would say, I think I'm more focused on how I can capture the spirit of the subject matter, and I would love to leave the question to the audience, because for me, I think my work is more like a mutual dialogue. So I want to invite the audience to join my journey, and they can see for themselves how the divided emotions in the United States come together and in search of the American dream. Yeah, so that's more like an intention, and how I kind of my reception of American was like a transfer from when before I came here, and then after I come here. So does it answer your question? I hope so.
Yeah, thank you, Yu-Chen.
Sure.
And lastly, certainly not least, Anthony, I'd like to ask you the same question about what myths your work is busting. I mean, when I look at your work, I do think about the racialized landscape, and I guess maybe to dig into it more, what are you, you also talked about how, our perspective of these images will change with time. I guess I'd like to know, what are your hopes? What are your deep hopes for these images? And maybe maybe if you could speak to a little bit more, maybe what community of maybe activists or others that your work is in conversation with.
Yeah, so the myths, I mean, as you know, I would say that there's a lot of myths that a lot of perceptions, misperceptions people have about New York City's housing projects, and about what I mean, my understanding is very different. Like I said, I'm an outsider, even looking in and getting to know and trying to develop relationships and being sort of, I would say, being respectful, trying to understand while creating the images. I'm also trying to, trying to I'm trying to keep my space open. So of course I'm influenced as well by ideas coming into a situation, but I'm also trying to keep it open, and making the pictures and letting the picture develop over time in my own perception as well. So the more I read, the more I speak to people, the more I understand, the more my perception also changes. So what ultimately I want the work to do, I still don't know, right? But what I do know is that there are a lot of there's a lot of immediate and necessary change that needs to be like pushed up against, which is like, the pictures hopefully act as a form of resistance to that. Because as I said, like when I was getting into the Sunset Park pictures, I'm first coming in and dealing with talking to a group that's pushing up against and resisting, like the myths. People are coming in and saying, well, you need us because we're going to give you a better way of life, and we're going to build luxury housing, and we're going to make we're going to make your life better. Meanwhile, the whole, the cycle of racialization, I mean, you don't even need the player, the racist player anymore. It's just that what's expected. I mean, I one day I'm devastated from hearing a 7-year-old girl telling me, well, I know that they think we're bad, and not bad in like Michael Jackson bad, bad, like, and I'm just like devastated by thinking that a 7-year-old could even have that perception, that like the world is looking at her as a bad person, and like, so hopefully like I say, the images help, or they start to create dialogues, they start to push up against and resist the kind of like stereotypes and kind of like the racializing, and understanding that this condition that I'm photographing is sort of like a systemic thing. It's not, I mean, it's almost, it's almost like designed, when I think about the work that I've done in some other neighborhoods, and not as projects, but photographing and seeing that there's this kind of like, let it get to a point, we let it get to a point where they need to come in and help us, where they need to, so let it get dilapidated. Don't put any services there. Don't put any, don't focus our attention on maintenance, and then like come in as the kind of like white saviors and be like, oh, well, now we're gonna help you and we're gonna provide, So ultimately, hopefully, and in the process, not only am I hoping that my pictures, speak to the not only the residents themselves and the people who whose space I'm photographing, but those who are also in the struggle, I don't know if that answers your question directly, but
Yes,
yeah.
thank you, Anthony. So at this point, I would like to open up to questions from the audience as well as to the artists, if you have any questions for one another. Thank you for speaking in depth about these series. I really appreciate hearing it. Oh, we have a question.
Lori Spiegel here, class of 75. I just wanted to thank the museum and the artists. This has just been a wonderful way to spend some time on a nice sunny afternoon here in New Jersey. The museum is wonderful. I've had the opportunity of visiting it, and I hope to get back there soon. So thank you all so much. I have a question for Laylah. Am I saying your name right, Laylah?
Yeah, my name's Laylah, yes.
Laylah. There was one photograph that was shown a number of times of three very brightly colored dressed women. And I was just wondering where was that? I'm not sure if you explained it yet already. And what were they doing? They seemed very, very joyous.
Yeah, so that was, that's the image actually in the exhibition. And it's taken in Senegal, in Saint Louis, which is the city I talked about being the former colonial capital there. And so I took that picture last year. It was one of the last photographs I took in Senegal. I haven't been back to Senegal since. I would love to go back. And they are actually three of the best seamstress in that city. And they just came from speaking on a documentary that was being made by the Smithsonian. And so it was an afternoon of filming them talking about what they do, who they are, beauty in Senegal, and the idea of sanse. This is a concept in Senegal where, a concept around beauty and the embodiment of womanhood. And so they were all speaking about that. And it was a great afternoon. And this is right after they left that filming, that taping. So it was pretty joyous. They were, happy and feeling great, and you got that from and I tried to record that with this photograph. So yeah,
It's beautiful. Thank you. Is that documentary available online?
It's, I think, that documentary was made for an installation for a show that'll be in the Smithsonian whenever, I'm not sure.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
We have another question from Nadia, who's asking, Nadia, I wondered, is there an artist in particular you want to hear from, or is it just more general to hear about the relationship between art and activism? And actually, Laylah, I'm going to go back to you because we didn't even touch on this, but you really get around very quickly to document stories. I remember, I think it was, I'm forgetting the timeline, how quickly after George Floyd's murder that you were here in Minneapolis to document activists and how communities were organizing themselves. So I'd love to hear you speak about that.
Oh yeah, just I'm a journalist. I've been working as a journalist for a while now, and so I felt it was important to be in the Twin Cities. One of the reasons why I felt it was important because I was just there in St. Paul actually in February because I wanted to see the Jamel Shabazz Gordon Park show. So I was there in February. And when I came back, and when George Floyd was murdered, I felt such an urgent need to go back and witness and record and engage. And so I went there first, just out of my own will and interest and responsibility to be there on the ground as a documentarian. And when I was there, I picked up a few assignments. So in between those assignments with the New York Times and NPR and everyone else, I still felt it was important to engage with, just very focused on individuals and communities that were organizing and getting those stories that we didn't see in the larger media, because at that time you had very wide frames and views of people protesting en masse, but the individual stories, the slower stories, I felt I wanted to contribute that to the storytelling that was happening at that time.
Yeah, and then Yu-Chen, I know within your series of America Scene, you also have some images of folks masked, organized on the street. So I would love to hear about the relationship between art and activism for you.
I think for me, it comes very naturally, because for me, I feel it's a photographer or it's the artist's responsibility to show what's happening or what he or she is care about, and through like visual language. And I think it's also like an advantage for a photographer, since photography in these days is very easy to digest, and there are so many channels that people will be able to see photographs. So it's very different from the old days. So now Instagram, so Facebook, social media, everywhere you can see, like images. For me, I think that's just can very naturally that because of responsibility, but it's also because it's something that I'm also care about. So for example, and also how I started to shift a little bit for the orientation or the direction of American Scene is from, documenting, collect stories across different states, but now this year's more focused on my neighborhood, which is Brooklyn or New York City. Yeah, so it's just very interesting to see the progression and how things or historical events can progress in my neighborhoods, and how people they are very engaged, or they are very concerned about those happenings. And I think because for me, I'm also regular to participate in some like activism or some like more like a social movement events, and I can recognize some familiar faces as well. So I think for me, it's just like part of the life. So like a live art or the activism. I think those are all correlated and exist together. Yeah.
Thank you, Yu-Chen. And Anthony, I'd love to hear from you, the relationship between art and activism. And I know we really focused on your work in the States, but you do have this lovely image of Cairo in your background. And I know you have taken extensive photographs there too. So I wonder if that might resonate in this conversation too, in art and activism.
Well, it's a really interesting question, in the sense that I also did study social practice, so there's this kind of side to me that does it. I think it's interesting, because let me just go back, because I had a conversation just recently with a journalist, and this question of like being completely objective and not taking sides and this kind of thing, and then so my question to her was, well, you're going under the assumption that the news media is also objective, which is not true to begin with, you know. So I think there is no real sense of objectivity. I think there's a need to take a side. You know, this is my opinion, whether it's through journalism or through